Alright, so there were a number of people asking me to sort of do an analysis video on the fourth Secret Hitler tournament now that it's over. I mean, I've had a really good time recording the games, watching the games, the ups and downs, the rise and the fall, and the comebacks, and everything. It's been great. And so I decided to go ahead and what I wanted to do was a sort of analysis of the draft sort of video. So I created a scatter plot of all the players who played in the tournament. I have an overall chart which doesn't take into account their teams. So this is the line, right? This is where you'd expect a player to perform based on their overall ELO, right? So obviously ELO is not the greatest metric for determining whether or not you should draft somebody, but there is still a slight positive correlation. So you would expect a higher ELO player to perform slightly better than players with lower ELO. That is just a fact. That's an undeniable fact. And then I have a combined chart here with it has the correlation lines for each team. Certain teams really defy the correlation with very little correlation, if any. And then other teams, like Manu's team, is about 50% correlated. That's not too bad. Sorry, my throat's a bit dry, so I apologize if I take a sip of water every once in a while. But what I wanted to get out of doing this, and it did take quite a lot of effort, by the way, is I wanted to see if there was any sort of information we could get about certain players to see if they were drafted either too early or too late, and to try and say like what I would have done differently if I was one of the teams that came in between second and seventh place, because obviously I have nothing to tell Medusa. Like, his team is just incredible. Before I begin, though, I just want to stress a number of things, right? The first thing I want to mention, this doesn't really matter that much, but I didn't graph the captains on this. Part of that is because there's no information, at least easily accessible, that contains the ELO of the captains when the tournament began, which is necessary for this chart because that's how I calculated everybody's ELO, was based on what their ELO was at the beginning of the tournament, not at the end. But the real reason I decided not to do the captains is because I wanted this to be a true sort of analysis of the draft. You know, I have an image over here, right, on my other screen of the draft up, where people were taken and when and by who. And I want to compare that to this plot graph. I mean, the scatter plot graph, and see if there are certain players that should have definitely been gone up or down, right? But obviously, the captains, they don't exist in the draft, right? They were the people performing the draft, making the picks, and so any sort of advice that I have will be for them, right? Like what they should have done differently. They were all chosen by the community, and so trying to analyze this graph with the captain scores in it would kind of stunt things just like a slightly, probably not much, but slightly enough that I really don't think I would want to add the captains. And now the more important thing I want to stress: if you are one of the players, if you are any player on the overall chart, and there will be a link in the description to all of this, but if you are a player who is underneath this line, right, I'm probably going to say something about you that you're not going to like to hear, right? Like, you underperformed, you didn't do as well as you should have. There are other people that should have been drafted ahead of you. First things first, right? One of the easiest controls for this that kind of screws up a lot of players that are under here, especially over on this side of the graph. Some of these players only got one game, and many of them only got 2 games, right? And that's not a lot of games. That's not a whole lot of data to go on, to base an assumption on. Okay, so a lot of players, you can see if you draw a line. In fact, I will draw a line. You can draw a line straight like this, right? Oh, I went over and it screwed up. Give me a second. You can draw a line straight like this and straight like this. And those 2 lines are at 3 points and at 0 points. And that tells a very important story, right? Like, a lot of the decision making that gives these players like such a bad rep is that Their captains just did not give them enough games for us to get a real feel for. Now, a lot of these players have like 3 or 4 games, and so this doesn't apply to them. But don't take that with. If you're one of those players that got like 1 or 2 games and you didn't win any, or you only won one, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. A lot of you are going to be lower in the draft anyway, and honestly, your captains were probably happy if you won even 1 game. So, the second thing I want to stress to anybody that did not apply to is that this scatter plot does not take luck into account, right? Obviously, I do not, and I don't want to, and I don't have the time to go through all 48 games individually, figure out like all the players that were in each game, whether or not they even had a chance to win, try to control for that, and say, well, each sort of player could have done this differently, so that loss actually matters, so I'll weight it more or weight it less based on, deck luck being a more prevalent thing. There was a lot of that in this tournament, okay? And that really applies a lot more to players on both sides of the line, by the way. Some players got just really lucky, and they hit 7s, and they just outperformed expectations like crazy. Like Chopin here, he might have stood out to you already. He's an 1850 player with 18 points. He's the second highest scoring player who was drafted in the entire tournament. He was drafted 8th overall. Not 8th overall, he was drafted in the 8th round. Excuse me. I'm probably going to make that mistake quite a few times. By Acro, the team that came in 6th place. Right? The 6th place team had the player with the second highest score that wasn't a captain. And so, I mean, it's just crazy how that works, right? Like, you wouldn't expect that sort of thing to happen. Part of that's luck. And that applies very much to all the people underneath this line, too. Some of these people were just given raw deals and they couldn't win it no matter what they changed. And I take that. I watched all the 48 games. I recorded all of them. I don't remember everything that happened on all of them, especially the ones that happened a long time ago, towards the beginning of the tournament. So if you got really unlucky in all 4 of your games and I say you underperformed, make sure you take that into account, right? And the last thing I want to say to everybody, every single person on this graph, whether you did good or you did bad, everything I'm about to say is results-based information. And so what I mean by that is the logic for whether or not a person should have been drafted earlier or later, based on the scores they got, is completely results-based. Like, it's all because they got this many points. So because Chopin got 18 points, he should have been drafted higher than 8th in the 8th round. Should you draft a player like Chopin higher than the 8th round? Yeah, probably. I think I might draft him in the 4th or 5th round, or maybe the 6th round. In fact, 6th round sounds about right. His performance suggests he should have been taken 2nd overall after Andrew, which is definitely not something I think anybody would have ever thought. So he's an example of a dark horse candidate, and he probably won the dark horse. I actually don't know which awards went to who. But he should have... so he represents a sort of player that just completely defies like everything about the logic that goes into who you draft and win, So, anyway. I hope you can take that into account. I don't mean to offend anybody or to try and put anybody down based on anything that I'm saying. It's just an analysis based on the results given how the tournament went. And so with that, let's go ahead and get into it. So let's start with Jeb's team. So Jeb's plot, at first glance, it doesn't look that bad. It's got not a great correlation at 0.3, but still decently correlated. The better players sort of performed on par with how you would have expected them. But this is the 7th place team, and this is the 7th place team for a reason, and that is because Secret Pause here, the outstanding player that you definitely would want to draft ahead, even of the 5th round, they have 9 points, and that's the most any one player scored on Jeb's team. Now, Jeb's team is remarkable in that it only has one player with 0. It's not the only team like that, of course, but They only have one player with 0 points, but they just were not able to capitalize on their early lead, and that cost them in the end when push came to shove. Because at the end of the day, the special games at the end of the tournament, that is where the tournament is won or lost. That's where the momentum is, and the momentum shifts because those games are worth 30 points by themselves. And so if you have an 11-point lead halfway through the tournament, it doesn't really mean much if you can't convert that lead into, proper momentum to stay ahead. And so you don't even need to look at this. All you need to look at is this. This is the team score for Jeb's team. This first half is absolutely fantastic. You have a really nice big 6-game win streak in here. You have some, only 2-game loss streaks in it, and then you're getting back to winning. That's what you want for the entire tournament. If a team that does that will win every tournament. Unfortunately, you just look at the second half, and you have 2 days with 0 wins. You have so many losses. You don't have but like 2-game win streaks. It's the exact polar opposite of what their early game performance was. And so there's nothing to be said, right? It sucks. They started off so hot. When I did my analysis video, my ranking video, and I ranked them number 2 overall, that was with the stipulation that, like, when I look at their personal score sheet, right, they had a lot of people who had points, and that signaled to me that they had a lot of depth, right? They could get wins from even players you wouldn't expect, which is what you want. You want to get wins from players you wouldn't have expected to get wins from. Unfortunately, it just didn't convert, You see a lot of, there's one person with a 100, or 2 people with 100% win rates, and they both only had 1 game. People just started to lose, and nobody was scoring points. So Paz did great. Paz wanted me to shout him out. He definitely carried his last place team into last place. He's the standout of this group. Unfortunately, this line just does not tell the story, right? If you go to the overall chart, the combined chart, even in the combined chart, you can tell, like, the yellows where Jeb's team are. They're all sort of towards the bottom of this list. They don't have anybody in this quadrant up here where they're, like, clearly outperforming. Here's Paz. Paz performed well enough to be a member of Medusa's team. That's how well Paz to be average on Medusa's team, I should say. That's how well Paz, that was their most outstanding player. If you look at the overall chart, it's kind of hard to tell. There's Paz, again, above average. JDZA was above average. There's a lot of players that were below average. Wander, the number 1 overall pick, below average. Arc, another a 2nd-round pick, below average. Carl Gauss, below average. Now, like I said, there's a lot of luck involved. I'm not trying to say that these players are bad players and that you should draft them later or anything like that. But if I were to give any advice to Jeb, all I would say is you need to draft players that are going to carry you in the late game. You need to draft more of them. You cannot rely on being good at regular games. And that's what they were. They were very good at regular games with regular players. But as soon as anybody sent in, like, a Medusa or a Maxi, somebody who was just really high yellow, this team just could not carry. They had to be carried in those games. Generally speaking, of course. Of course, there were plenty of situations where they just got unlucky. So that's the only thing I'm going to say about Jeb. And I think that's enough time to spend on Jeb's team. Let's go to the sore losers. So Acro's team is a bit sadder. This line does not tell the whole story. So if you look at Clap's line, this looks better. But it ends at, like, just over 7, starts at just over 2. This one starts at just over 1, ends at about 8 or 9. Let's see if we... So, and the reason that's so stunted is because you have Chopin up here just outperforming, just completely, he's up in there in his own little world. And Claire did pretty good too, not going to lie. So, those are the 2 outstanding players. Unfortunately, the problem with Acro's team is that the average for Acro's team is just below average for the tournament. If we go to the overall chart, I keep clicking overall chart instead of combined. We go to the combined chart. We're looking for green players, green players, green players. Well, here's a green player. They're way above average. Well, Claire doesn't look like she's above average. She looks like she's on point to be on, any of Maxi, Vice, or Medusa's team. Maxi, I mean Manu. But if you look at the overall chart, of course, Claire is above average, and so is Chopin. But there's a lot of middle of the road guys and a lot of people below the average, and that's just an unfortunate thing. Really, the only thing I'd tell Acro is that, to be fair, part of the problem is that they got off to such a rough start, right? Like if we go look at sour losers, like you just look at this whole streak here. The first 11 games, they got 2 wins. The first 14 games, they got 3 wins. The first 17 games of this tournament, that's nearly half the tournament gone, they had 4 wins. They're so far behind by this point that it doesn't matter how good this looks. And this does look good. You got a nice little 5-game or a 4-game win streak here. You got a 4-game win streak here. Yeah, you're not taking huge loss streaks. That's what you want to see in a team that's doing well. This looks good from game 22 on. It's not good enough to do anything but move them from 7th to 6th. They would have needed to probably win every single game from here on out, the area I've highlighted there, in order to even have a shot at winning the tournament. And even then, I kind of doubt it just because of how poor their start was. So really, when it comes to looking at, when I look at Acro's team, I just think that she needs to draft a little bit better, honestly. And also, I think she kind of gave some players games that they shouldn't have gotten, and other players should have gotten more games as well. Like Star Matrix here. Star Matrix was a 10th overall pick with only 1 game, and they won that 1 game, Like, that's pretty good. Obviously, it was very good to put Chopin in for 5 games. I think Claire could have gotten a 5th game, and I think Acro should have played a 5th game too. They were these top 3 here were the ones carrying the team to victory. I don't see why John RJ shouldn't get another game after winning 2. Inoki probably should have gotten a game or 2 less. It's really hard to say that out loud because I respect Inoki very much and he's a very good player, but this just was not his day. This tournament, he just could not pull together and win these games. His only point is from a silent game win, and he only won 1. So that's pretty unfortunate for Acro's team. Their team was in pretty dire straits from the get-go, and it just didn't look like they had any shot, and that probably also affected it. So getting off to this is kind of the opposite of Jeb. They got off to a bad start, and that kind of can affect morale. So maybe draft a little bit. Maybe put some of your heavy hitters a little earlier in play. Use them a little earlier to try and get some wins that they should. So Invas felt overdrafted. He was drafted 2nd overall by Acro, and Inoki felt overdrafted as well at 3rd overall. Maybe an Inoki should be a player you consider taking late or letting somebody overdraft so that you can find players that are a little bit better or more, at least more productive is the word I'm going to use. Obviously, this is all results-based, and so, of course, I don't mean any disrespect to those players. They are very good players. Secret Lib was another standout, I think. Secret Lib played 2 games, but Secret Lib was drafted 5th overall, and they're the 2nd highest rated player to have 0 wins. The highest one was Benjamin, so that's kind of unfortunate as well. Maybe give Secret Lib another game. Try and see if they can at least eke out a win, or give them one less game. Maybe just don't draft them 5th overall. Maybe they should go 6th or 7th. That's my philosophy, at least. Let's continue. Let's go to Strom's team. Now, Strom's team was a team that I had a lot of high hopes for. I kept them at number 1 in my ranking video, even halfway through the tournament, because they were doing so good. And, by halfway through the tournament, the top 4 teams were all within, 3 points of each other, so it's like it could go any way. And I really did like Strom's team. And I think this plot chart kind of proves why I felt the way I do, Because if you take Maxi out of this list, right, then the draft looks something like this, right? And that's what you want to see, If Maxi performs really well, then this line. So it's really unfortunate that Maxi, he had some bad luck, and he's obviously a really good player, and so his performance being far below average is regrettable. Very interestingly, just like Jeb's team, Strom does not have a single player that scored more than 10 points. And that's significant because even though he has a really good core of players right here, that are decent ELO and they scored well above the team average. And if you look at the overall chart, here they are. They're in this group here. They're above the line. There's left winger. There's fat midget. Players like that. Tyrox. Let's see if I can find some more. Whatever. They had that good core. They just and Blitzkrieg destroyed it. He was taken 15th overall. He's by far the best 15th overall pick of the entire tournament. They just could not be consistently winning games. They needed a player like Maxi to really push them over the top, and also I think Strom as well. Like their place in the tournament. One of the things that I didn't rate in captains, but Strom would have been rated as one of the lower captains because he didn't play. He only played one game. He won the one game. He should have played. He also just like Jeb's team, he's got a really good looking set of players that like nearly everybody has at least a point, and only Billy Bob didn't score a point. Billy Bob was taken 14th overall, so that's not all that bad. They just could not, be consistent, right? They have very few people with 100% win, or they have one person with 100% win rate, and that's Strom with one game. And he was the only person to play one game. Now, Strom personally told me that his philosophy playing this tournament was he wasn't going to try to overly strategize things. He was just trying to try and let everybody play as many games as they could. And I appreciate that sentimentally. Obviously, it's nice that players get to play, but you're not going to win tournaments with that sort of strategy. One thing Rivstar said in his video that I caught, I didn't watch his whole video, by the way, before making this. I just watched part of it, but he said Strom was only a captain because Maxi decided to sit out, and then Maxi was drafted first overall anyway. I don't really think that's that important. Like, you can say that Strom mismanaged his games, I guess, but he definitely did not draft poorly at all, in my opinion. Maybe certain players just shouldn't have had as many games as they did. Maxi way underperformed expectations as a one overall pick. Third overall pick. He should have way more points. It's really unfortunate for him because a lot of that came down to just bad lines and bad draws. A lot of luck, I remember a lot of Maxi stuff because I had the chance to co-commentate with him, and also because I know Maxi well enough, I pay more attention to his stuff. So I do apologize about that. Obviously, I know I have biases. Should Maxi have been drafted third overall? Well, obviously the plot graph says no. He's definitely still going to be taken in the first round, regardless of whether you draft him third overall or if somebody else drafts him. Obviously, to the people in seats 1, 2, and 3 in the draft order, it's just lol draft Andrew because he just destroyed everything. Would I tell Strom to draft somebody other than Maxi? Probably not. Other than Andrew, obviously, for the memes. So, you go to the overall, the combined chart. It's a good-looking group, the red group. They've got one of the best player that's lower than 1,600 ELO, which is always good. They've got plenty of players above the line. Plenty of players above this line, and they just didn't have any standouts. They have nobody up in this quadrant, this region, scoring more than 10 points. That was the difference maker for Strom's team, and it's unfortunate because I did really think they had the potential to do better than they did. All right, let's get on to this tournament's winners. And this is absolutely an insane line, right? Like, if you thought the lines here, like, you look at Down to Clouds, you're like, oh, man, that line looks good. But it ends at 10, right? That's the thing you have to remember. This one starts at about 2, and then it ends at 13. And I think that's a lot of that is on Andrew. Like, Andrew lifts this line up quite a lot. If you take out Brain, let me get my line tool again. You take out Brain, and it looks something like this. It might be a little lower. It might be something more like this. Yeah. I think I'm more comfortable saying that would be the trend line. It doesn't go up much, but it still goes up quite extensively. So, ironically speaking, there's not much to be said about Medusa's team. It's just as hectic as some of the other ones, and they have quite a few players that underperformed by their standards, right? But the thing about it is, underperforming by Medusa's standards is still going to be average, or at least above average. Like, when you look at, okay, so you look at these guys here, these are the big hitters. They're way over their own team's average. And then, of course, Andrew. Then you go to the combined chart, and they're here, right? And here's the line. Like, there's their line, and they're outperforming that one. And that's the significant part, right? Here's Medusa's line, this lighter line going here at the top. It only crosses over here once you get to the maximum ELO. And so what that means is, like, where there are the most players, Medusa had the highest line, the highest average score from his players. And all of that you can attribute to these 4 players right here. You have Ant, who played out of his mind. He was a great draft pick where he was. I think he should have gotten drafted way ahead of 7th. I think I think Ant is the kind of player you can take in the 4th round. I'm not even kidding when I say that. I wouldn't expect to see him go in the 5th round in the next tournament, given how he performed this tournament. Div is great. He did amazing as well. I really enjoyed doing commentary with Div as well, and he's a great player. Definitely think he could be. He got drafted 4th overall, and I think he could go as 3rd overall, honestly. And Beyond got drafted 3rd overall, and he performed above average, of course. Would I draft him 3rd overall? Yes, I probably would, and maybe even 2nd overall, honestly, given his ELO and where he performed. Because you have to remember, as you go up this line, the expectations are higher. So, like, Ant way overperformed his expectations. Div then performed above expectations less, and then Beyond performed even less. And so, you draw a straight line between them with the number of points they scored. I think they all scored 12 apiece. Then you're like, well, how do you pick? But the point is, when you draw the line like this, you realize you can take Beyond, then you can take Div, then you can take Ant, and that's just how it is. That's your number 2, number 3, and number 4. No issue there at all. The way it actually worked was, this was his number 3, this was his number 4, and this was his number 7. So, Medusa, make no mistake, Medusa got a maximum amount of value from his upper picks. There's just no doubt about that. And then you even have outstanding performances from Lane God. You have performances from Paladin doing well. Ulk was a little bit of a... Ulk only got 1 game, I think. Yeah, he only got 1 game and he won it. So give Ulk some more games. He'll probably be up here too. Really, the only player I think that you could talk about that's a really big standout is Jimmy. Jimmy was drafted 2nd overall, and he underperformed his team standards. Now, underperforming his team standards means he's probably about average. And if we look at him on this draft, yeah, he's actually above the league average for players, given his ELO at the start of the tournament. However, his draft position as number 2 would suggest that he should be a little bit higher above that line, to be honest. And I probably, to be honest, should make a plot draft for a scatter plot for draft position versus how many points they scored. That might look a little bit weird. It might not be a scatter plot. It'd have to be some kind of draft. It'd be kind of nice to look at. It'd probably just be like a straight draft, like where like over here is the number 1 pick and over here is the final pick of the 15th round, and then however many points they scored. So anyway, nothing much else to be said about Medusa's team. Maybe give Ulk some more games. And Brain was a bit of a standout too, because Brain was drafted ahead of Ant, right? Brain way underperformed his ELO score. Now, he was taken 6th overall, but honestly, you look at guys like Morientes. Where's Morientes on here? Even Morientes is kind of below average. Let me look and see if there's other guys. Isaiah. No, I wouldn't take Isaiah ahead. Who else got taken? ahead or behind Batali. Batali is 1. Huh. Let's still look at Batali on the list. Where is Batali? Batali is 1800 ELO. It's on the combined chart. Batali did about average. That's still better than Brain, given Brain's ELO and position in the draft. I don't really see... Well, I mean, obviously you got... the next one on the draft that really stands out is actually Ant. So, yeah, Ant should definitely have been taken ahead of Brain. Again, I don't know Brain all that well. Let me see how many games he got first before I make too harsh of a judgment of him. Brain, he got 4 games. I think you should expect a player like this to get at least 2 wins. And 2 wins I think I'd be happy with. That's about all the optimization there is. But Medusa's team was stacked, right? Like, they had players that could win the regular games. They had players that could win the high elo games. They had everything in between. And they had luck on their side. They won 9 games in a row to end the tournament. There's no way that there's not some luck involved in that. And there was. And they always seemed to just have everything just right. But there were some standout moments, of course. You know, Andrew carried the 1 game, and that was insane. I remember that. And beyond, double confing Pingu with Tyrox was an absolute gem of a moment in the tournament that will be remembered for a while. So, you know, I have no advice for Medusa. Medusa won the last tournament. He won this tournament. Just keep doing whatever it is you're doing and drafting all the same players, because clearly you know what's up. Some of these players maybe you could drop for other players. Maybe like Jimmy could be dropped for a Bremen or a... I almost said Inoki, but Inoki kind of underperformed. Jimmy could be dropped for a div, quite ironically. Like, unfortunately, like when you look at Medusa's team and you're like, who would I draft ahead of that person? You just look at other people on Medusa's team, because those are the people that are also overperforming. And again, their line here, the fact that Jimmy's still here, scoring 5 points, that's below average for his team. It's right on point. It's actually above average on the overall chart. So, with that, let's continue on to the Manu bots. So, Manu's trend line is the strongest correlated trend line of the tournament. And I think if you remove Vincer, his line looks something like this, right? And that's an extremely powerful statement when you say it like that. So, sorry, Vincer, but unfortunately you kind of dragged the team down a little bit. The point is, what Manu's team was really good at was they were very good at high elo games, ones where they needed a strong player to go in and carry and win them the game. And that was enough to get them from 6th place after the first half of the tournament to 3rd overall. And they get some crowns as well. And that's great, but you're never going to win a tournament that way, honestly. You cannot rely on your carries to carry the team. If you have, 3 or 4 players with more than 10 points, maybe that's enough to carry you over the tournament, Like, we look at... That's all Medusa had. Right, but you don't have that. You have 1 player with 10 and you have 1 player with 16, and the rest are under 10. You need to be able to win regular games, and you need to win early as well. And this exact same thing happened to Manu in the last tournament, right? He started off poorly, and then he clawed his way back up, and eventually I think he got 3rd, which was exactly where he landed this tournament. So my advice for Manu is just, I guess, get better at drafting players that you're going to send into the regular games. Like Rivstar was a great draft pick, in my opinion, at 4th overall. I think Electron was an insane draft pick at 9th overall. I mean, the 9th round, excuse me. He way overperformed. That's a really good one. And Pepsi was pretty average. Probably average for a cream team member. You just look at these players here, and they're all just underperforming. Lyra subbed out for a player that got drafted. I don't remember who. And so she only got 1 point, but you got a bunch of people to 0. It's just not a team that can really... You cannot rely on outstanding performances by 1 or 2 players. You have to have at least 4 players with like 10 points, really, realistically, and then you've got to have, everybody else getting between 3 and 6 points. And I mean nearly everyone else. Obviously, we've got some 3s in here as well. Well, pretty much everyone has at least 3 points on Medusa's team, except for this person and this person, and they won the tournament, so that's the conventional wisdom. The funny thing about Manu's plotline is if you go to the combined chart, don't quote me on this because I don't really know how statistics work, but his plotline, when it gets over here, it trends above Medusa's team. And so I don't know if that means that his team is officially better. Because I think overall, you want to take into account the whole line, and for the most part, Medusa's team, until this point, is definitely the highest line, except at the beginning. Like, Strom had some really strong low ELO players that lifted his above. So if all the players were lower than 1,700, Strom would win that game, I think, most of the time. Because he has the most that are overperforming. But I think Manu's team had the chance to build momentum if they had maybe twice as many games and et cetera, to really put a challenge forth to Medusa. But they built their momentum too late. If we go to the, let's go to their team score thing. This is probably something I should be visiting more often for each team. This first half is solid but not great, and they were in 6th place after this performance. They have a huge 5-loss streak here, a 3-loss streak here. Those are things you want to not see. Then they got their act together and they put together a win streak here. They were winning. The losses were kind of spotty. Another 3-win streak here. And critically, they were winning these 5-point games that are very important for a team to win. And that got them 3rd place, and that's pretty respectable that they could come back from 6th to 3rd. But yeah, that's the end of my advice for Manu. Is he's just got to learn how to draft players that can win regular games and win early. Maybe send some of the players, some of your heavier hitters, earlier on. Vincer kind of underperformed a little bit. Vincer got 3 games. Maybe give Vincer another game. Actually, Vincer, for 3 games to win 2 of them is not bad at all by any stretch. But he was only sent to 2 regular games. Maybe send him to another game and give him one that's worth a few more points. Maybe he'll improve his stock a little bit. So I wouldn't say that Vincer played badly. The fact that he only got 3 games kind of is indicative of maybe poor judgment by Manu. Maybe Vincer should have been given an extra game. But I mean, if you're going to draft somebody like 3rd, for your 3rd pick, you better give them some games. You better give them 4 games to start, and then they better win at least 3 of them, usually. At least 2 of them, and if they're only going to win 2 games, they better be games worth more than 3 points. So, I don't know, that's my philosophy. So, moving on, let's talk about Pingu's team. Pingu's team is all over the place. This is the definition of a scatter plot that has nearly 0 correlation to the line. It still has a positive trend, which is good. That's what you want. A negative trend is really indicative of a team that has no cohesion whatsoever. What that means is that your lower ELO players, who in theory should have less games to play, are somehow outscoring your high ELO players that are playing more games. And so a team that has a negative trend probably wouldn't even score like 50 points in the last tournament. That would be horrible. So, outstanding performance by Dev, Joe Schmo, Monty Java all did great. And unfortunately, they just, Benjamin way underperformed. Shiro and Yules only performed on average by this team. By far, this trend line is the lowest, I think, in the tournament. It's on par with Jeb's, and that's not good. You want your trend line to be higher, obviously. But the point is, like, if you were to pit, like, there's a reason Pingu's team, I forget what place they came in. No, I don't want schedule, I want a leaderboard. They came in 5th, whereas Jeb's team came in last, and they actually beat out Acro's team. So the reason for that is very straightforward. It's because the scatter plot doesn't mean anything, right? Like the trend line, does not mean anything. for this team. It's totally up to chance where this team is going to land on the board, and then this tournament they just happened to land. They happened to land in 5th place. So if a couple things go differently, maybe this team could improve. But you need to have. I think so far Pingu's team has the most zeros, which is they have 4 zeros, which is really bad. They have the highest ELO player to score 0 points in the tournament in Benjamin. Benjamin was a 2nd overall pick, and I absolutely agree with that second round pick from Pingu. I think Benjamin's definitely a great pick. Unfortunately, Sale, who got picked right after Benjamin, did way better. If Sale is in those games, do I think he wins them and Benjamin doesn't? I don't know. I mean, I think Benjamin just had some really bad luck this tournament. But, them's the breaks, Benjamin's got to play better. Yules has got to play better, too. I'm glad she was able to at least get her one win in a special game, so she broke her curse finally and has a win in a tournament. She was on my team last tournament and got 0 wins, and then she lost her first 3 games in this tournament, too. So it's amazing how much one win will just elevate a player, even though it's to this trend line. And if you look at the overall chart, Yules is still... Where's Yules? She's somewhere in here. There she is. She's still well below average for her ELO rating. Now, in terms of where she was drafted 5th overall. So, compared to players that were drafted 2nd, I keep saying 5th overall. Sorry, I just have that in my head. I can't quit. Compared to players that were drafted, in the 2nd round and the 3rd round who were underperforming, I don't mind that Yules got only 5 points. I would like Yules to get more points. Would I draft somebody else? No. I don't think that I would draft anybody else ahead of Yules, given her position on the draft. So, yeah. I don't really have any response to Pingu, except, get a little luckier, maybe. Like, his team looked really good from the outset. If you look at the combined chart, he's got a lot of players in this region. A lot of players over here. Not a lot of these players. He actually had the lowest ELO player in the tournament, Sad Nixon, and of course Sad Nixon did pretty good, actually, getting 1 win. I don't know if he had more than 1 game. He had 2, so it kind of sucks. You'd kind of hope to get another win from Nixon, but it's fine. I mean, he's still an outlier, for sure. Way below the ELO average. He's kind of off in his own little realm there, and he's still above the trend line, and that's what you want to see from a player like that. So, it's not bad at all. Alright, let's talk about the final team, which is Dice's team. Dice's team looks very much similar to Manu's team, except it looks even more extreme. His trend line just dives straight down to 0 before it even hits 1500. Whereas most people's trend line, at least, it doesn't even hit 0 until way lower ELO, And so what is that indicative of? It means that there were some players that outperformed, and he had a lot of higher ELO players, to be honest. And that's really all there is to it. He has 2 players at 1600 and then 1700, and then everyone's 1750 or above. So good job by Billy, the vice captain of his team. He did pretty good. If I look at the combined chart, Billy's here. Billy's better than even Medusa's teammates. Medusa's trend line, I should say. Given his ELO, obviously he's worse than Div, but I still think he did fine. Ikana did great. So did Starsheet. Both of these players did amazing, given their ELO rating. Who is that? That's Artsy. Yep, Artsy did amazing, of course. Artsy is one of the and if you slice off this upper triangle of the graph with these 6 players in them, that's like the best 6 of the tournament, basically. They overperformed expectations and did really well, and then Normally they'd all be here, and then you have freaking Andrew just up there just going nuts. I'm sure he's gonna watch this video and still be disappointed in me for not talking about him more. But what do you say about something like this? He's such an outlier that he just completely destroys the chart. Nobody should be able to score this many points in the tournament, and I think by himself, he's raising this line, the bar, quite a lot, and making a lot of these players here. Like, if the bar was even slightly lower, they'd be over the line or average, and that's totally fine. Being average is fine in this tournament. It's just not going to get you wins. Nope, the only thing that gets you wins is when somebody does this. And it must be said, Medusa also scored all wins in all of his games as well. So when your captain and vice captain do that, you almost don't need anybody else. And and they still had 3 players that scored 12 points. Those 3 players are all fantastic. Sorry, Dice. I know I said I was talking about you, and I still went back to talking about Medusa, but let's get on it. So, Scorcha underperformed. That's one standout thing. Maybe Benjamin should have been taken in Scorcha's spot. And Benjamin scored worse, ironically. So I guess actually you replace Scorcha with Sail, which is an interesting statement. Sail moves up to being a first rounder. And I think Sail should be a first rounder. I think people should take into account that Sail is actually a pretty good player. And he played. There were some games Sail played that were fantastic. Artsy did great. I think Artsy should be a first rounder. Honestly, I would take him ahead of this tournament. I'd take him ahead of Wander. I'd take him ahead of Maxi. That's results based. What about Tom and Dev? I know Dev did good. Yeah, Dev did fine. What about Tom? Tom did okay. 10 points is pretty good. Yeah, no, I wouldn't take him ahead of Tom. I mean, Artsy did objectively better than Tom, but I still don't know. I mean, it's arguable you should take Artsy ahead of Tom, but I don't think it really matters overall. So, anything else stand out really? Let me look through his draft, because Vice's draft was a little bit tougher to interpret. Starsheep was drafted 7th overall. Ikana was drafted 9th overall, and both of those players they should have been drafted in the 6th round at the very latest, in my opinion. Some players got drafted way ahead, so like Schlobby. Schlobby's just kind of average here. At 2,000 ELO, you'd expect a little better. Look at the overall chart. Schlobby is still above average, and in his class of people in 2,000, he is a cut above the rest. But 9 points. I'm not saying he shouldn't have drafted Schlobby, but like, who do you replace Schlobby with? Schlobby was 4th overall. You got 2 wins out of 4. That's not bad at all, honestly. Who do you replace him with? It would be Div. Once again, you just go to Medusa's team and poach their players. It sucks, but that's just how it is. That's how the tournament turned out, Given the results, Div was drafted after Schlobby. Schlobby's still above average, but not by nearly as much as Div. Or Ant, for that matter. So, anything else about his team stand out? Not really. He had some okay performances, some underperforming. Woody and CO, totally average. Anna, good job, Anna, with that one game, So this was kind of an interesting thing while making these charts, is certain players who had been drafted had either not shown up or been subbed out, I guess. And so certain players, any player you find that has sub next to their name, that means that's a player that's subbed in for that team. Vice had 2 players like that, Meta X Velta and GRT Attractor. Both of whom did not, I don't know the full circumstances. They either didn't play and got subbed out, or maybe they were alts of these people, who knows. And those are not the only 2. But Vice's team is the only team to have 2 people get subbed out. And I almost panicked for a bit, because I was like, what if they have different ELOs? But they actually have, both of them, the players that got subbed out, exactly 1,600 ELO. So that worked out pretty well. And I guess I should take this moment to explain, like, I replaced the ELO of the player the person replaced, right, rather than using their own ELO. I didn't want to undercut the draft pick by saying, oh, well, even though they drafted this person 13th or 14th overall, they wound up getting a sub that was way better than that player, so that was fine. I wanted to rate based on, what you got for your draft pick, what you should expect. And Cyanide, got 0 points, and Anna got 3 points with theirs. And I'm pretty sure that the subs can only play one game anyway. So, totally in line with a 13th or a 14th overall pick. So let's go to the combined chart and see if there's anything crazy we can make out of it. So, obviously, you got your top 6 players. Should they be drafted 6th overall? I mean, Chopin, no. I'm sorry, Chopin. As good as you did, I would probably take you 4th overall. I mean, 4th round. Sale should be a 1st rounder. Artsy should be a 1st rounder. Dev should be a 1st rounder. And Claire should be a 1st rounder. And Andrew should be 1st overall next tournament. I think that's what we learned from this tournament. So, nothing too crazy there. And then you have a whole glut of players here. They all did really good and probably outperformed expectations. Like, especially, Ant needs to be moved up in the draft. He should not be a 7th overall pick. Joe Schmo, where's Joe Schmo on the list? I actually don't know. He's on Pingu's team. It's nice having color coordination, isn't it? So Joe Schmo, Monty Java should both be moved up in the draft, I think. Where did he take him? Joe Schmo was taken 10th overall. Definitely a solid 6th or 7th round pick, in my opinion. Monty Java was taken 4th overall, so the fact that they overperformed is actually kind of expected. And Monty probably, honestly, just deserved to be picked in the 4th round, I would say. I don't know if I'd bump them up to a 3rd round pick. I mean, to be fair, it's Pingu, right? His 3rd round pick, Shiro, is only like 3 picks ahead of Monty. So maybe if you want to snap him up earlier than Shiro, there's a case to be made there. But otherwise, I think he's totally fine going 4th overall. Because he's one of the first people in the 4th round of the drafts to get picked. Where is Shiro on this list, actually? There's Shiro. A little under average. Yeah, a little under average. There were a lot of, that's kind of a thing, Even though this trend line is not, that correlated with reality, it still has some slight correlation. And one thing that's kind of interesting that kind of brings the trend line down a bit is that there were a lot of players with exactly 2,000 ELO that just did not perform to their expectations. Because when you have 2,000 ELO, you're kind of expected to go into at least 3 games, and you should win at least 2 of them. And those games should be worth more than 3 points apiece, so you're talking about at least 7 points to 8 points. Like where the trend line is exactly the amount I would expect a 2,000 ELO player to score in the tournament on average. You'd want more, obviously. You always want your players to be above this line. But you can be happy with that as long as you have some overperformers in some other area. You don't need a person like Blitzkrieg to score more than a person who has 2,000 ELO. And that happened. This person, Blitzkrieg, was a 15th overall pick, scored better than all these players. Right? All these players in here. 15th overall pick. 15th round pick, I mean. Let's continue on the combined chart. Starship Econ, I already talked about them. Good job, guys. You guys did great. Starship had some wonderful voice chat games, I think. People didn't like it, right? But, who cares? Who cares what the observers think? As long as you're winning those games, that's what matters, and Starship did it. So, the results speak for themselves. Do I think Starship should be drafted earlier? Let's see. Where is Starship on this draft? He was taken by Dice in the 7th round. I would bump him up to maybe a 6th or a 5th round pick, depending on who's left and what we're looking for. He got taken after Humble Genius. He got taken after Warlock, but Warlock did better, ironically. Slightly better. There were a couple people that got picked ahead of Starsheep that probably shouldn't have, if I'm honest. Chopin, I already talked about. Sale, I already talked about. Beyond as a third rounder is fine. I don't think I would change his position. You kind of would hope to get a little more out of Tom than 10 points. So, I mean, he's still way above average. I wouldn't say he did bad. He just didn't do crazy production levels. So, I don't know. It's been 55 minutes of me trying to just going on, rambling on. I'll have a link to all of this in the description. You can view it yourself, and you can make your own sort of judgment calls. And I want to thank the community for, pushing me to do this, because it was worth it, I think, in the end. I might make another scatter plot soon to try and suss out, draft position versus points scored and see what that one looks like, and that might be interesting as well. I don't know if that'll warrant a video, but if I do, I'll probably put that in the description. If not, make a video about it. Maybe I will make a video about it. Who knows? Depends on if people really want it. If you sat through all 55 minutes of this recording, you're a hero, and I love you, and I thank you very much for that. Listening to me ramble on, I know it's not the greatest thing in the world. So, it was really well played by everybody. I really enjoyed this tournament a lot, and I really, the most important thing I want to stress from this video more than anything is if you watch this video and you're offended by anything I said, whether you're above the line or below the line, it's not meant to be that way. It's just like straight analysis based on the results of the tournament, So, there's probably a lot of people that I'm not really talking at great length about, like Paladin, for instance. I know Paladin fairly well, and I didn't really talk too much about him. There's a lot. I don't know a lot of you, and I don't know a lot of what I would say to you different, or anything. So I apologize in advance if you are mad at me for anything I've said in this. It is meant to just be sort of like a neutral, just here's where everybody came, this is what should have been different, etc., etc. But unfortunately, of course, that's hindsight 2020. Obviously, people got lucky. Some people got extremely lucky. Some people got so freaking lucky that, the universe just seemed to freaking part ways and give them everything they needed to win this tournament. And other people just, could not find the blues or the reds that they needed. And so, to them I say good luck in the next tournament. Hopefully the cards will be in your favor more. So, with that, I think I will end the video.